In this Diablo 4 video, I'm going to be showing you the Elementalist Sorcerer Build, which is a beginner sorcerer build that's aimed at World Tiers 1 and 2. It's kind of just to help you get off to a right start with a sorcerer or sorceress and have a direction to go. And it's just kind of like the first 25 to 30 levels of the game to give you sort of a direction. What's really great about this build, and one thing I think makes it very, very beginner friendly, is that you don't have to decide immediately what element you want to focus on. You can actually use fire, lightning, and ice with this build all effectively, so you can kind of figure out and try out different spells and see what you like, and then maybe specialize in one later. So the general concept of this build is to have fun with your gameplay and have a wide variety of things you can do, and that means you're going to have like a varied arsenal with this build. You're going to have burst DPS from Fireball, you're going to have passive damage coming from Hydra, you're going to have crowd control from slowing and freezing, so you're going to have like a little bit of everything with this build. You're going to have a damage shield, which kind of gives you a feel for how sorceresses and sorcerers play in this game while you're learning the ropes. And again, what's really great about this build is that you can evolve it into any other sorcerer build, because this is just a good thing to use early on. Before I get into the skills though, I just want to note that this is a very mana hungry build, as most of the skills we're using are DPS skills. So we do have some gear recommendations that you can aim for to help with your sustain and survivability, and I will be going through those after we go through the skills. So there are several different strategies to employ with this Sorceress build, and these change depending on whether or not you're facing a large group of enemies or a boss. So let's start with a group of enemies first, and then we'll cover how to handle bosses after that. So let's start with summoning your Hydra. Hydra should be summoned as soon as you're starting a fight, and it has a decent duration. Will start chipping away at enemies with passive damage while you're using your other abilities. So because we're using Hydra, we're obviously going to want to select the Enhanced Hydra upgrade for this when we get another skill point. That's going to give it +1 head when you're over 80% health or healthy. So make sure you keep your health topped off, that way you can get that extra damage out of it. And we also use Arc Lash a lot in this build, and we have the critical built into that. So we've opted to use the Invoked Hydra morph of this to get us a +3% chance for Hydra to crit for 3 seconds every time we crit. That's going to make Hydra deal more damage for us, so you want to take that one. So once you have your Hydra down, you're of course going to cast Blizzard. This is going to start slowing and freezing enemies, and we have our Blizzard set up to deal increased damage to frozen and chilled enemies. And we also have the potent +30% boost to our core skills, which will be Fireball in this case, while the Blizzard is going. So while Blizzard is being cast on the screen, if you throw Fireball, it's going to deal 30% more damage. So once you've cast Hydra and your Blizzard is running, it's time for Frost Nova. Now that enemies are slowed, you're going to move into the middle of them, getting right in the center if you can, and then you're going to cast Frost Nova to freeze them all, and each enemy you hit is going to give you 4 mana back, and as I mentioned before, this is a very mana hungry build, so this really helps manage your mana. And because we also have the Shimmering passive upgrade for this after the enhanced one, killing these enemies while they're frozen will help reduce the cooldown of Frost Nova so that you can use it again more quickly, so this is really great. And once you've cast Frost Nova, then it's time to use Fireball. So basically, you're going to continue this rotation anytime you face a pack of enemies. You're going to drop Hydra, then use Blizzard, then use Frost Nova, and then use Fireball into the middle of all those frozen enemies, and then anything left you're going to clear up with Arc Lash. So that's how we handle groups of enemies. Now let's talk about boss fights. And boss fights are handled similarly, but there are some key differences. Your initial rotation will be the same as with a large group. However, after this, you'll have to learn and time your attacks to use them at the best time possible. For instance, bosses might be doing things where you can't just continue this rotation easily. You might have to wait for the opportune moments to use your abilities. One example is that you want to use Frost Nova when adds spawn in order to gain that mana regeneration from them, and in order to freeze them all. So don't just drop, Frost Nova on a boss. You can't freeze bosses anyway. They're immune to CC. So make sure you're not just wasting Frost Nova. You also want to make sure that you use your Flame Shield and, at the right time so that you're absorbing damage when you need to absorb damage, and you're not just wasting your shield, because obviously you want to take damage into your barrier and not use it when, nothing is hitting you. So one thing I want to mention is that we don't actually have teleport in this build. Many sorceresses out there from previous games and from this game are probably like, wait, what? No teleport? And obviously teleport is probably something you want in an endgame build for clear speed and things like that. But in early game, it's not so important. The dash evade ability is actually more than enough to get you out of most situations with the way we're set up. So you don't actually need teleport for this build. There's actually bonuses on certain pieces of gear that will give you an extra evade, so you can evade 2 times before they come off cooldown. That's definitely something you should look for, and a lot of attacks, again, are like big telegraphed hits. They give you plenty of time to get out of the way, so you don't really need that teleport. You might want it later on for some specific builds, but as a beginner, it's better to learn how to use evade. And also keep in mind that we're using Arc Lash as our basic attack, so you want to be near enemies because this has an AoE area. And if you're like zipping through enemies and you're not staying near them, you're not going to be able to hit them with Arc Lash. So now let's move on to a couple things you should do as quickly as possible. And once you hit level 16, you need to do the Sorcerer Quest Legacy of the Magi. This will unlock the enchantment system. This is located in the Lost Archives dungeon near the area where you first began the game. So you're going to want to do this in order to unlock that. So as soon as you've done this quest and you've completed it, you're going to want to set Firebolt as your enchantment passive, which will give all of your direct damage skills a burning effect. This is great for Arc Lash because we spam this a lot in this build. So that's going to give them all burning. And later on, killing enemies that are burning will actually replenish 20% mana regeneration, which is very useful for your sustain. And when you reach level 30, you can use Frost Nova on your second enchantment slot, while also having it as an active skill, and make your Hydra trigger automatic Novas now and then too, which will help keep enemies CC'd. Also, by completing that very same dungeon that you did your class quest in, you'll gain the access to the legendary aspect, defensive aspect of the Protector, which gives you a damage shield or a barrier anytime that you're attacking an elite for 10 seconds out of every 30 seconds, which is really, really good in this game. And you don't have a lot of defensive abilities on your bar for this build, so this is a great way to get some defense, and you can put this on any rare item that you want that fits the category, which is great. Also note that if you put it on your amulet, you'll actually get 1.5 times the bonus, so this will be a lot stronger barrier on your amulet than on other slots. So the next thing you're going to want to do immediately after that is go get the Staff of Elemental Command. This is obtained from defeating Corton Hool, who is a rare spawn on the world map. It is in the Fractured Peaks, Seats of the Heavens area, and you can find this on the map on the screen or on the Diablo 4 interactive map. But what's really great about this staff, besides the fact that it is a fixed drop, is that it gives you 4 to 9% of each elemental damage type: fire, frost, and lightning. So because we're using all of those in this build, this is a particularly good staff for us. So once you have this staff, or a good weapon that you're happy with, if you don't happen to have this staff, you're going to want to put the Rapid aspect on it found in the Buried Halls dungeon in the Dry Steppes. This is also on the interactive map if you need help finding it, but what this does is it increases your attack speed by 15% for your basic skills. And we use Arc Lash all the time with this build, and if you have this on a two-handed weapon, this is actually going to be 30%. It can go higher than this, but anytime that you use a Codex of Power, you get the minimum value. So the minimum value on a two-handed weapon will be 30%, but that's still 30% increased attack speed, and that's going to make it so that you can just spam your Arc Lash really quickly. You can also add a gem slot to this item and slot a topaz in it to further boost your basic skill damage, which will boost Arc Lash, which is great. If you're struggling to find legendary items also, make sure that you continue the main story because you gain some legendaries from doing that, and also from using your Murmuring Orbs at the vendor for those, and you can try and get stuff there as well. When it comes to bonuses on your gear, you're going to want to look for bonuses to the specific skills that we use. Frost Nova, Hydra, Blizzard, Fireball. Any bonuses to these are great, and remember that you can go to the Occultist and swap out a bonus to try and get one of these if you got like a bonus to a different skill that you're not using. And lastly, just a final tip here. If you're struggling with the build that you're playing, particularly if you're playing a sorcerer, but it's also applicable to any other class, and you're playing on World Tier 2, just drop down to World Tier 1. There is really absolutely no reason whatsoever to play World Tier 2 in Diablo 4. All you gain from it is plus 20% experience and plus 15% gold from monsters. That plus 15% gold is about 3 or 4 gold per enemy early on in the game, which is absolutely nothing. Selling one item will often net you about 2,000 or 1,000 gold, something like that. So that far outweighs the gold that you're going to gain. And the extra experience can actually be detrimental because the faster you level in this game, the more quickly your gear becomes obsolete, because as you level, enemies level with you. So if your gear is not leveling quickly enough or it's not upgrading fast enough, you actually get further behind. And if your clear speed is actually faster on Tier 1, then you'll gain more experience faster anyway, because you'll be moving through the game faster, which will get you more experience faster. So don't play on World 2 if you're having trouble. Play on World 1, and when you get high enough level, then just swap directly to World Tier 2 and do the thing you need to do to unlock World Tier 3, and then move to World Tier 3. Well, that wraps up our Elementalist Sorcerer build. I hope that gave you guys some information on how to get started with an Elementalist. We'll obviously have more mid-game and late-game builds for the Sorcerer and Sorceress class as well, and we'll have other beginner builds for other classes and more builds coming, so stay tuned for those.